I'm standing in a lawyer's office with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and my son is crying. Not the kind of crying I used to soothe when he was small. This is different. This is the crying of a man who's been caught, who knows the walls are closing in, who's watching his mother hand a stack of bank statements to an attorney while his wife sits frozen in the chair beside him. My daughter-in-law's face is the color of old paper. She's gripping the armrest so hard her knuckles have gone white. The lawyer, a woman about my age with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, is sliding documents across the mahogany table one by one. $73,000. 3 years of my life. And my son is still trying to tell me I'm confused, that I'm remembering it wrong, that I offered that money freely. But this time, nobody's listening to him. This time, I have proof. Let me take you back to where it started. 3 years before that lawyer's office. 3 years before I knew what gaslighting was. Before I understood that love could be weaponized. Before I learned that the people you trust most can hollow you out from the inside until you don't recognize your own mind. I started that morning the way I started every morning, drinking coffee alone at the kitchen table before dawn. My basement apartment in Brooklyn had small windows set high in the walls, the kind that only show you feet walking past on the sidewalk above. The concrete floors stayed cool even in summer, cold enough in autumn that I wore socks to bed. It was that time of year when the leaves fall and the light turns golden in the afternoon, when the air smells like wood smoke and dying things. I'd been living in that basement for 3 years by then, in my son and daughter-in-law's house in a quiet cul-de-sac where families have lived for generations. Families that looked at me with pity now when I took out the trash. Families that had stopped inviting me to block parties. The basement had become my entire world, 20 by 15 feet. A single bed pushed against the wall, covered with the quilt my mother made before she died. A small dresser I'd bought at a yard sale 30 years ago, still sturdy, still holding what was left of my clothes. Most of my nice things were in storage. They'd said there wasn't room down here for everything, and I'd believed them. The bathroom was tucked in a corner, separated by a thin accordion door that didn't lock. I'd learned to shower at odd hours, early morning or late night, when I knew they wouldn't come downstairs and walk in. They'd done that twice, claiming they didn't know I was in there, claiming I should put up a sign or something. After the second time, I'd stopped showering when they were home. The kitchenette consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a microwave they'd given me when they bought a new one for upstairs. The hot plate only had one working burner. I'd asked if I could use the kitchen upstairs to cook sometimes, and they'd looked at me like I'd suggested burning the house down. "Mom, we talked about this. You have your own space. We need our privacy." I couldn't remember talking about it, but by then I'd stopped trusting my memory anyway. The coffee was instant because they said I wasted money on the good kind. I sipped it black because they said I used too much cream. Gospel music played low from the small radio I kept by the sink, the only sound in the house at 5 in the morning. The radio was old, held together with the electrical tape, but it still pulled in the Sunday service station if I positioned the antenna just right. I'd listen to the choir singing, "His eye is on the sparrow," and try to remember what it felt like to believe that someone was watching over me. I'd already pulled fresh cornbread from the oven, cooling on the counter for the party later. The smell filled my small space, butter and cornmeal and a hint of honey, the way my grandmother taught me to make it. Cooking was one of the few things I had left. They couldn't take away the muscle memory in my hands, couldn't erase 50 years of recipes stored in my brain. When I baked, I was still myself, still the woman who'd fed her children, her church community, her neighbors. Still someone with something valuable to offer beyond money and free labor. My son's birthday, 42 years old today, and we were having people over, though I wasn't sure if I was allowed to be there or if I was supposed to stay downstairs. They hadn't been clear, and I'd learned not to ask questions that might annoy them. The invitation to the party had been vague. My daughter-in-law had mentioned it a week ago, casually, while I was folding laundry upstairs. "We're having people over next Saturday for Jason's birthday. We'll need you to help with setup and cleaning." Not, "We'd love for you to celebrate with us." Not, "We're having a party and of course you're invited." Just an announcement of my expected labor. I'd nodded and smiled and said, "Of course, I'd be happy to help," because that's what I always said. That's what I'd been trained to say. I went to my closet and pulled out my cobalt blue church dress with the matching hat. I'd bought it 2 years ago for Easter service, back when I still went to church. They'd told me I couldn't go anymore after I'd apparently embarrassed them by talking too loud during the sermon. I didn't remember talking loud. I didn't remember talking at all, actually. But my son had been so upset, his face so tight with shame, that I'd apologized and stopped going. The dress still had the tags on it. I cut them off carefully, saved them in the small drawer where I kept things that felt important, even though I couldn't say why. The drawer held other artifacts from my former life, a program from my daughter's college graduation, a birthday card from my late husband, the ink fading now but the words still legible. To my Helen, who makes every day brighter. A photo of me and my mother at the beach, both of us laughing, salt water drying on our skin. I'd look at that photo sometimes and wonder where that woman went, the one who laughed like she had nothing to fear. Before going upstairs to help set up, I did the one thing they couldn't take from me, feeding the birds on the porch every morning. I climbed the basement steps quietly, let myself out the side door, and scattered seed across the wooden slats while the neighborhood slept. Sparrows and finches arrived in the gray dawn light, some of them bold enough to eat while I stood there watching. A cardinal couple came too, the male brilliant red against the morning sky, the female more subtle in her brown and rust. I'd name them Fred and Ginger. They came every morning, reliable as sunrise. This was mine. This small ritual. They'd tried to stop it once, said I was making a mess, attracting rats, creating problems. But I'd kept doing it anyway, quietly, early enough that they couldn't complain without admitting they were monitoring my every move. Sometimes you hold on to the smallest things just to remember you're still a person with choices. The birds didn't judge me. Didn't tell me I was remembering things wrong. Didn't need me to be anything other than the woman with seeds in her pocket and time to spare. Fred hopped close to my foot, tilted his head, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Something that had been clenched tight for so long, I'd forgotten it was there. The rotary phone on the wall in my basement still works. It's old, cream-colored, the kind with a dial that clicks when you turn it. My mother gave it to me 40 years ago when I got my first apartment. It had followed me through 3 moves, 2 marriages, and 1 divorce. It rang less and less now. My friends had stopped calling. They'd said my daughter called sometimes, but when I asked to call her back, they said she was busy, that I shouldn't bother her. The phone felt like a relic from another life, a life where people wanted to hear my voice. Sometimes late at night, I'd pick up the receiver just to hear the dial tone. That steady hum meant I was still connected to the world outside this basement. Still part of the network of human voices and conversations and relationships, even if nobody was calling me anymore. I'd hold the receiver to my ear and imagine calling someone. My old friend Patricia, who I used to meet for coffee every Tuesday. My sister in Atlanta, who sent Christmas cards I never seemed to receive. My daughter, who they said was too busy to talk. But I'd always put the receiver back down. What if I called and they didn't remember me? What if they confirmed what my son and daughter-in-law had been saying, that I was difficult, negative, not worth the trouble? I headed upstairs with the cornbread. The kitchen was already bright, sun streaming through the windows they'd told me to clean twice a week. I'd cleaned them yesterday, spent an hour on each one making sure there were no streaks, no smudges, nothing they could criticize. My daughter-in-law was setting out champagne flutes on the counter, expensive crystal they'd bought with money I'd given them for essentials. She was wearing a designer dress, navy blue with white piping, and her hair was professionally styled. She looked beautiful and untouchable, like a photograph in a magazine. She didn't look at me when I entered. "About time," she said. "People are coming at noon." I glanced at the clock. It was 6:30 in the morning. I'd been awake for 2 hours already, baking, getting ready, preparing myself for whatever role they'd assign me today. But she said it like I'd kept her waiting. "I brought the cornbread," I said. "Great. Put it on the counter and start on the bathrooms." I put down the cornbread. The pan was still warm. I'd wrapped it in a kitchen towel to keep the heat in, the way my grandmother taught me. My daughter-in-law glanced at it without interest, moved it aside to make room for her champagne flutes. I thought maybe I could help with the food setup. I started. "Mom." My son appeared in the doorway, already dressed in slacks and the expensive cologne I'd bought him last Christmas with money I didn't have. The cologne had cost $80. I'd eaten ramen noodles for 2 weeks to afford it. He'd opened it Christmas morning. Said, "Thanks, Mom." without looking up from his phone. "We talked about this. You're helping with cleaning, remember?" I didn't remember, but I nodded. He softened his voice, the way you talk to a confused child. "You offered last week, remember? You said you wanted to help, and we agreed you'd handle the bathrooms and tidying up. We went over this." He exchanged a glance with his wife, one of those silent married couple communications. The glance said, "See? She's getting worse." "Of course," I said. "I remember now." I didn't. But what was the point of arguing? You're probably sitting there right now thinking, why didn't she just leave? Why didn't she see what was happening? And I need you to understand something. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in increments so small I didn't notice I was disappearing. It started the week I moved in. I'd given up my own apartment to help with the grandchildren, my 2 grandbabies who needed someone while my son and daughter-in-law both worked. I'd been so happy to help, so grateful to be needed. My apartment had been small, but it was mine. A 1-bedroom in a building with good light and neighbors who knew my name. I'd lived there for 12 years, knew every crack in the ceiling, every spot where the floor creaked, every way the afternoon sun came through the kitchen window. I'd emptied half my savings to help them with the down payment on this house, told them it was an early inheritance, told them I wanted to invest in their future. $35,000 from the account I'd been building since my husband died. Money I'd saved carefully, $1 at a time, imagining it might take me somewhere someday. A trip to Paris, maybe, or a little house by the beach. But when my son said they'd found the perfect house, that they were so close to affording it, but just needed help with the down payment, I'd said yes without hesitation. That's what mothers do. We give our children their dreams, even when it means giving up our own. They'd hugged me and called me generous and said they'd take care of me forever. The first time something felt wrong was subtle. I'd been watching the kids on a Tuesday, and when my son came home, he asked why I hadn't cleaned the kitchen like we'd discussed. I didn't remember discussing it. He showed me a text I'd supposedly sent saying I'd handle it. I looked at the text. It was from my number. But I didn't remember sending it. I stared at the phone screen, reading the message over and over. "I'll clean the kitchen after the kids go down for nap. Don't worry about it." It sounded like me. It was the kind of cheerful, helpful thing I'd say. But I had no memory of typing it, no memory of the conversation that prompted it. The words felt familiar and alien at the same time, like hearing a recording of your own voice and not quite recognizing it. He looked at me with concern, that gentle voice you use with someone who's confused, and said, "Mom, are you feeling okay? You sent this yesterday." I'm sure I did. I just don't remember. "Maybe you should write things down," he suggested. "Keep a list or something so you don't forget." I apologized. I cleaned the kitchen. I started wondering if I was losing my memory. It happened again the next week. They said I'd agreed to pay for the new living room furniture. I didn't remember agreeing, but there was an email chain with my address in it. Messages I couldn't recall writing, but that sounded like something I might say. "Of course I'll help. You two work so hard, you deserve nice things. Consider it an early Christmas present." The furniture cost $8,000. Italian leather, they said. An investment. When the delivery truck arrived, I looked at the massive sectional sofa and tried to remember agreeing to buy it. Tried to remember typing those enthusiastic emails. The memory sat just out of reach, like trying to remember a dream after waking. My daughter-in-law sat me down, held my hand, and said, "I think we need to get you checked out. This forgetting thing is getting serious." Her voice was so kind, so concerned. Her hand was warm over mine. I almost cried from the tenderness of it. This small moment of care in a house that was starting to feel cold. "Maybe you're right," I said. "We love you, Mom," she said. "We just want to make sure you're okay." I went to the doctor. The doctor said I was fine, just stressed, maybe a little depressed from the move. "Your cognitive function is excellent for your age," Dr. Morrison said, looking at my test results. "Your memory, your processing speed, everything looks good. Are you getting enough sleep? How are you adjusting to the new living situation?" But my son and daughter-in-law shook their heads sadly when I told them what the doctor said. They said the doctor didn't see what they saw, didn't know me like they knew me. They said I was getting worse. They started keeping lists of things I'd forgotten, things I'd said I'd do but didn't, conversations I couldn't remember having. They showed me the lists with such patience, such sad concern, that I started keeping my own list, trying to track my own mind as it apparently slipped away from me. I had a small notebook, spiral-bound, that I started carrying everywhere. I'd write down conversations as they happened, tasks I agreed to, things I promised to do. But somehow my notebook never matched their lists. They'd say I'd agreed to things I had no record of, and I'd look at my careful handwriting and wonder if I'd forgotten to write it down, or if I'd been so out of it I didn't remember the conversation at all. I stopped going to church because they said I'd caused a scene. I stopped calling my daughter because they said she'd complained I called too much. I stopped answering the door because they said I'd been rude to their friends. I stopped having opinions about dinner because they said I always criticized the food. I stopped asking to join them for family outings because they said I always looked miserable in photos and it ruined the memories. Each boundary fell like a domino, so gradually I didn't notice the pattern. First it was church. Too loud during the sermon, they said. Embarrassing. Then it was friends. I'd apparently told Patricia something offensive, though I couldn't remember what, and she'd stopped calling. Then it was family events. I'd ruined a birthday party by making it about me, though I couldn't remember doing anything but sitting quietly in the corner. Piece by piece, I shrank. The gaslighting is what therapists call it, though I didn't know the word then. Psychological abuse and reality distortion. They were making me doubt my own mind, my own memories, my own perception of reality. And I let them, because I believed in something fundamental: reciprocity. I believed my sacrifices guaranteed love in return. I'd given them everything: my home, my money, my time, my energy. I'd crossed every boundary I'd ever had because I thought that's what family did. I thought if I loved them enough, served them enough, made myself small enough and useful enough and quiet enough, they'd love me back. They'd see my value. They'd treasure me the way I treasured them. But what I actually sacrificed was something I couldn't get back: boundaries. I forgave endlessly and never said no. When my daughter-in-law snapped at me for using the wrong cleaning spray, I apologized and bought the right one. When my son told me I couldn't come upstairs during dinner parties because they needed adult time, I ate soup alone in my basement and told myself I understood. When they said I was too negative and it was affecting the children, I practiced smiling in the mirror until my face ached. When old friends stopped calling and I asked why, they said, "Maybe you're just not that interesting anymore, Mom." And I believed them. I believed them because I'd been taught that mothers don't have needs, only duties. That grandmothers should be grateful for any scraps of attention, that women my age should fade gracefully into the background, should make themselves useful without making demands, should give without expecting anything in return. By the morning of the party, I had no boundaries left. I'd given them all away, one small concession at a time, until I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. She looked tired. She looked small. She looked like someone who'd already given up. The party started at noon. I'd cleaned both bathrooms until the fixtures gleamed, scrubbing grout with a toothbrush, polishing mirrors until there wasn't a single streak. I'd vacuumed the living room, moving furniture to get every corner, every baseboard. I'd arranged the food table exactly how my daughter-in-law wanted it. Cheese platter here, crackers there, napkins fanned out just so. Then I'd gone back downstairs to my basement like they'd told me to, waiting to be called up if they needed me. I sat on my bed listening to the sounds of the party above. Laughter, music, the heavy footsteps of people I used to know. People who thought I'd moved away or died or just didn't care enough to stay in touch. I could hear my son's voice, loud and happy, telling a story that made everyone laugh. I could hear my daughter-in-law playing hostess, her voice warm and welcoming with guests in a way it never was with me. Nobody asked where I was. Nobody came downstairs to find me. I was the invisible woman living in the basement, the ghost in my own son's house. I tried to read but couldn't focus, tried to listen to the radio, but the gospel music just made me sad. I looked at my cobalt blue dress hanging on the back of the closet door. The matching hat perched on the shelf above. I'd ironed the dress this morning, steamed out every wrinkle. I'd polished my good shoes, the black pumps I saved for special occasions. I'd planned this outfit thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd be invited to join the celebration. Just for a little while, just long enough to wish my son happy birthday in front of his friends, to remind everyone I was still part of this family. Around 2 p.m, my daughter-in-law called down the stairs. "Mom, we need more ice." I climbed the stairs in my cobalt blue dress and matching hat. I'd changed into it hoping I might be invited to join the party for just a little while. My heart was beating fast, nervous as a teenager at her first dance. When I reached the kitchen, the room went quiet. 20 people staring at me. My son's face went tight. I recognized some of them. Neighbors from the block, my son's co-workers, a few family friends I hadn't seen in months. Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down, who used to bring me tomatoes from her garden. Marcus, my son's best friend since high school, who I'd fed countless meals over the years. They all looked at me with a mixture of surprise and something else, pity maybe, or embarrassment. My daughter-in-law laughed, this high, bright sound like breaking glass. "Oh my God, Mom, what are you wearing? We're not at church." I just thought, I started, but my voice came out too quiet. Nobody was listening anyway. "You look ridiculous. Go change and bring up the ice." The room was so silent I could hear ice cubes settling in someone's glass across the room. Could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow. Could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I stood there, frozen, while people looked away. My son didn't defend me. He turned back to his conversation like I wasn't there, like I was a minor embarrassment that would resolve itself if he just ignored it long enough. Mrs. Chen looked at me with something like sympathy, started to open her mouth, but her husband touched her arm and she closed it again. Nobody wanted to make this awkward. Nobody wanted to acknowledge what was happening. I went to the basement freezer, got the ice, brought it back upstairs. My hands were shaking so badly the bag rattled. My daughter-in-law was holding a glass of red wine, talking to her friends near the food table. She saw me approaching and turned, and I don't know if it was an accident or if she meant to, but she stumbled and the entire glass of wine went down the front of my cobalt blue dress. The room went silent again. She gasped, covered her mouth. "Oh no, I'm so sorry." But she was smiling. Just barely. Just enough that I could see it. That tiny curl at the corner of her mouth that said this wasn't an accident, that said she knew exactly what she was doing. "It's fine," I whispered. "Here, let me help you clean up." She grabbed napkins, started dabbing at the stain, pressing hard enough to hurt. Her fingers dug into my ribs, into my chest, grinding the wine deeper into the fabric. "God, Mom, you really should be more careful where you stand. This is why we usually keep you downstairs during parties." Someone laughed. I don't know who. The sound cut through me like a blade. My son glanced over, saw what was happening, and looked away again. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't tell his wife to stop. Just turned his back and resumed his conversation about fantasy football or golf or whatever trivial thing mattered more than his mother standing there soaked in wine. "I'll just go change," I said. "Good idea. And maybe stay down there for the rest of the day? We don't want any more accidents." I walked down the basement stairs in my wine-stained dress, and I could hear the party resume above me. The laughter came back. The music got louder. Nobody followed me down to check if I was okay. Within minutes, it was like it never happened, like I was never there. I stood in front of my small basement mirror and looked at the ruin of my church dress. The deep red stain spread across the blue fabric like a wound, like blood seeping through skin. I'd bought this dress with money I didn't have because I wanted to feel beautiful, wanted to feel worthy of being seen. $200 on sale, and I'd agonized over the purchase for weeks. Talked myself into and out of it a dozen times before finally deciding I deserved something nice. And now, it was destroyed. Like everything else. I tried to cry but couldn't. The tears wouldn't come. I just felt hollow, scraped out, empty. That's when I saw her phone. My daughter-in-law's phone was sitting on the small table near my bathroom. She must have left it there earlier when she came down to tell me something, some instruction I'd already forgotten. The screen was lit up, a text notification glowing in the dim basement light. I should have left it alone. But I saw my name. I picked up the phone. The message was from her group chat with friends. I didn't mean to scroll, but once I started, I couldn't stop. OMG, the maid is wearing a church dress to the party. Your MIL is so weird. At least she stays in the basement most of the time, LOL. I scrolled up. Weeks of messages. Months. Told her she agreed to clean the whole house. She totally bought it. The confused old lady act is getting old. She's not that senile. I know, but it's easier than actually hiring help. My son's number appeared in the chat. My son. Participating. Told mom she offered to pay for the furniture. She's checking her bank statements now, looking all worried. This is too easy. You guys are evil. She's loaded and she's not going to live forever. Might as well get what we can while she's still useful. There were more. Dozens more. Screenshots of my bank account they'd somehow accessed, jokes about my confusion, plans for what they'd ask for next, a new car, a vacation to Europe, renovations on the house. They'd mapped it all out, calculated exactly how much they could extract before I caught on or ran out of money, whichever came first. I sat down on my bed. The phone was shaking in my hands. Or maybe I was shaking and the phone was just along for the ride. They were doing it on purpose. All of it. The confusion, the memory problems, the isolation. They'd been coordinating, planning, deliberately making me think I was losing my mind so I'd be easier to control, easier to extract money from, easier to use. I wasn't going crazy. I was being erased. The phone slipped from my hands onto the floor. I looked at the rotary phone on my wall, the one my mother gave me, the one that had been my connection to the outside world before they'd convinced me nobody wanted to talk to me anymore. I stood up, walked to it, and I ripped it off the wall. The plastic casing cracked against the concrete floor. The bells inside made a sad jangling sound. I picked up the pieces and threw them again, harder this time, and watched 40 years of memories shatter into plastic shards and copper wire. Then I sank down next to the pieces and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. Everything I'd believed about myself, about my family, about my worth, broke with that phone. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being systematically destroyed by the people I'd given everything to, the people I'd loved more than myself, the people I'd trusted to love me back. I don't know how long I sat there on that cold concrete floor. Above me, the party continued. Music thumped through the ceiling. People laughed. My son blew out birthday candles while I bled out in the basement, invisible and alone. But something shifted in that moment of complete collapse. Something hard formed in the center of my chest, where my heart used to be. They thought I was weak. They thought I was finished. They thought I had nothing left. They were wrong. I had one routine doctor's appointment scheduled for the following Tuesday. I almost canceled it. What was the point? But something made me go. Maybe it was spite. Maybe it was the last spark of self-preservation. Maybe it was God. I'd stopped praying months ago because they'd made me feel foolish for believing. But sitting in that waiting room, I found myself praying anyway. Please, I prayed. Please let someone see me. Please let someone believe me. Please let me not be crazy. Dr. Morrison had been my physician for 15 years. She was a short black woman with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense. She'd seen me through menopause, through my husband's death, through the depression that followed. She knew me, really knew me, in a way few people did anymore. When she walked into the exam room and saw me, she stopped. "Helen, what happened to your arms?" I looked down. I had bruises. Purple yellow marks where my daughter-in-law had grabbed me during the party when I'd asked a question about serving dessert. She'd squeezed hard enough to hurt, hard enough to leave marks, and I'd been so numb by then I'd barely noticed. "I bruise easily," I said. Dr. Morrison sat down. She didn't pick up her tablet to enter notes. She didn't start the routine examination. She just looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "How are things at home?" And I broke. I told her everything. The money, the isolation, the phone messages, the wine-stained dress, the basement apartment, the way they made me doubt my own mind. I told her about the rotary phone in pieces on my floor, about the birdseed on the porch that was the only choice I had left, about the cobalt blue dress hanging in my closet with a stain that would never come out. I told her about the texts I supposedly sent that I didn't remember sending, about the furniture I apparently agreed to buy, about the friends who supposedly complained about me, about the church scene I supposedly caused, about the family events I supposedly ruined. And the worst part, I said, my voice breaking, is that I believed them. I thought it was me. I thought I was losing my mind. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across and took my hand. "Helen," she said quietly, "what you're describing is elder abuse, financial exploitation, and psychological abuse. And I know someone who can help you." The lawyer's name was Patricia Chen. She specialized in elder abuse cases. Dr. Morrison called her from the exam room, and Patricia agreed to see me that same afternoon. I sat in Patricia's office at 4 p.m., still in the same clothes I'd worn to the doctor, and told my story again. This time, I had someone taking notes. This time, someone believed me without question. Patricia was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded me of Dr. Morrison. Her office was small but organized, every surface covered with case files and legal books. She poured me coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing all day, strong and bitter, and let me talk. "Do you have any documentation?" Patricia asked when I finished. "I have bank statements. I have emails, I think, if they didn't delete them." "I have." I paused. "I have a photo of the text messages. I took one with my old camera before I put the phone down. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed proof that I wasn't making it up." It was true. After I'd dropped my daughter-in-law's phone, after I'd destroyed my rotary phone, I'd picked her phone back up with shaking hands and used my old digital camera, the one I'd bought 15 years ago and kept in my dresser drawer, to photograph the screen. Photograph after photograph of their messages, their plans, their cruelty. Some instinct had told me to preserve the evidence, even when I didn't know what I'd do with it. Patricia smiled. It was the first time someone had smiled at me in months without it feeling like a weapon. "That's good, Helen. That's really good. Here's what we're going to do." She laid out a plan. First, we'd gather evidence. Every bank statement, every email, every text, every witness who could confirm my isolation. Second, we'd hire a private investigator to document my living conditions, to interview neighbors, to build a timeline of the abuse. Third, we'd bring in a forensic accountant to trace exactly where my money had gone, and under what pretenses. "This won't be easy," Patricia warned. "Your son will fight back. His wife will make you out to be the villain. Your family might take their side. People don't like to believe that children abuse their parents. It goes against everything we want to believe about family." "I know," I said, "but I can't keep living like this. I'd rather be alone and sane than surrounded by people who are making me crazy." "You won't be alone," Patricia said. "I promise you that." The investigation took 3 months, the longest 3 months of my life. The private investigator, a retired police detective named Marcus Webb, did his job thoroughly. He was a tall man with gray hair and a calm demeanor, the kind of person who made you feel safe just by being in the room. He interviewed neighbors who confirmed they hadn't seen me in months, who said my son and daughter-in-law told them I was becoming antisocial and preferred to stay inside. He documented my basement living conditions with photographs that made me cry when I saw them. The small windows, the concrete floors, the accordion bathroom door that didn't lock, the hot plate with one working burner, the mini fridge, the narrow bed with my mother's quilt. In the photographs, it looked exactly like what it was: a prison. He found the group chat messages on my daughter-in-law's phone records through a subpoena. She deleted them from her device, but everything lives forever in the cloud if you know where to look. Patricia had explained this to me with a grim smile. People think deleting something makes it disappear, but digital information is almost impossible to truly erase. The forensic accountant, a sharp woman named Lisa Park, traced every dollar. She was Korean-American, maybe 50, with reading glasses she wore on top of her head and a mind like a calculator. She sat with me for hours, going through bank statements, check registers, credit card bills, building a timeline of my financial destruction. $73,000 over 3 years. Money for the down payment I'd given them. $35,000 transferred directly from my savings. Money for furniture, renovations, a new car, vacations. Money they'd told me I'd offered freely, enthusiastically, that I'd insisted they take. But Lisa found emails where they'd pressured me, texts where they'd told me I'd already agreed when I hadn't. Bank transfers that happened the same day as messages where they'd convinced me I was forgetting conversations. "This is textbook financial exploitation," Lisa said at one of our meetings. "They created a paper trail that made it look like you were offering money. But if you look at the pattern, the timing, the amounts, the way they documented everything, it's clear this was coordinated. They knew exactly what they were doing." I spent those 3 months living in a different kind of basement. I stayed in my son's house because Patricia advised me not to leave. It would make the case harder, give them ammunition to claim I'd abandoned the family, but I stopped participating in the gaslighting. When they told me I'd agreed to something, I wrote it down and asked them to show me proof. When they said I was remembering wrong, I recorded our conversations on the small voice recorder Patricia had given me, legal in New York, where only one party needs to consent to recording. When they tried to isolate me further, I called Patricia and she called them, and suddenly they got very quiet and very careful. My son pulled me aside one day, his face tight with anger. "Mom, what's going on? Why are you acting so paranoid, recording conversations, asking for everything in writing? We're family." "Then you won't mind documenting our agreements," I said calmly. He stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the woman he'd been manipulating for 3 years was gone, and this new version scared him. They knew something was happening. They just didn't know what. I also found something I'd lost. Other people. Patricia connected me with a support group for elder abuse survivors. 12 women, all over 60, all with stories that made mine look almost gentle. Women whose children had stolen their homes, their identities, their entire life savings. Women who'd been locked in rooms, denied medication, told they were worthless until they believed it. We met every Thursday evening at a community center in downtown Brooklyn, in a room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs and a coffee maker that made terrible coffee. We drank it anyway. We sat in a circle and we told the truth. Nobody gaslit us there. Nobody told us we were remembering wrong. We witnessed each other's pain and we said, "I believe you. It happened. You're not crazy." One woman, Dorothy, had been through it all and come out the other side. She was 71, sharp as a knife, with white hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. She'd successfully sued her daughter for financial exploitation and won back most of her money. She became my unofficial mentor, the person I called when I wanted to give up. "They're going to make you the villain," Dorothy told me one Thursday. "When you finally confront them, when you take them to court or demand your money back, they're going to tell everyone you're vindictive, crazy, senile. They're going to say you're making it all up for attention. They're going to say you're a bitter old woman trying to ruin their lives. Are you ready for that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Here's the thing," Dorothy said. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to do it anyway." The confrontation happened on a Tuesday morning in March in Patricia's office. Official, cold, with a court reporter present to document everything. My son and daughter-in-law arrived thinking it was a mediation about my concerns. They walked in smiling, confident, ready to explain away my confusion with patience and sad concern. Then they saw the accountant, the private investigator, the stacks of documents on the conference table, the court reporter setting up her machine. My son's smile died. "Mom, what is this?" "Sit down," Patricia said. They sat. For the next 2 hours, we laid it out. Bank statements showing the transfers, emails showing the manipulation, text messages from the group chat, recovered from the cloud, showing their premeditation, neighbor testimonies about my isolation, photos of my basement living conditions, a timeline showing how they'd systematically convinced me I was losing my mind while extracting money and free labor. My son tried to interrupt. "This is a misunderstanding." "It's not," Patricia said. "Be quiet and listen." We presented evidence of $73,000 in transfers, money given under false pretenses and manipulation. We showed how they'd controlled my contact with the outside world, convinced me I was mentally declining, Isolated me from friends and family who might have noticed what was happening. My daughter-in-law started crying. Real tears this time, not the crocodile tears from the wine incident. Mascara running down her cheeks, hands shaking. "We didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," I said. My voice was steady. "I have messages where you planned it. I have texts where you laughed about it. You knew exactly what you were doing." My son looked at me then. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in 3 years. I saw something in his face. Surprise, maybe, that I'd fought back, that the confused, compliant woman in the basement had teeth. "Mom, please, we can work this out. Family shouldn't—" "You stopped treating me like family when you started treating me like an ATM and a maid," I said. "You made me think I was losing my mind. You isolated me. You humiliated me. You took my money and my dignity, and you did it on purpose with planning and coordination because you thought I was too weak and too stupid to ever figure it out. We can pay you back." My daughter-in-law said quickly. "You will pay me back," Patricia said. "We're prepared to file a lawsuit for financial exploitation and elder abuse if you don't agree to our terms today." She slid a settlement agreement across the table. Repayment plan for all $73,000 with interest, formal written apology, and a restraining order preventing them from contacting me except through legal counsel. My son's face went red. "You're really going to do this? Destroy your own family?" "You destroyed it," I said. "I'm just making sure you can't destroy anyone else." The meeting ended with them signing the agreement. Not because they wanted to, but because the alternative was a public lawsuit that would expose everything. My son's reputation in the neighborhood, my daughter-in-law's social circle, their carefully constructed image as devoted children taking care of an aging parent, all of it would shatter. They signed, and I walked out of that office without looking back. But here's the thing about justice. Sometimes you don't get the ending you want. My son's siblings, my other children, took his side. They said I was being vindictive, cruel, that I was destroying the family over a misunderstanding. They said elder abuse was a strong word for what was probably just poor communication. They stopped calling. They told their children, my other grandchildren, that Grandma was going through something and it was best to give her space. Space. That's what they called abandonment. For a while, I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I'd made too big a deal of it. Maybe I should have just forgiven and moved on. That's what family does, right? But then, I'd remember sitting on that basement floor with a shattered phone and a wine-stained dress. And I'd remember that I wasn't the one who broke this family. I was just the one who refused to keep pretending it wasn't already broken. The money came back slowly in monthly payments tracked by the accountant. My son never missed a payment. The legal agreement made sure of that. But he never called, never apologized beyond the formal written statement his lawyer drafted, never acknowledged what he'd done beyond the bare minimum required by law. And you know what? I was okay with that, because I'd found something more valuable than his approval. I'd found people who actually saw me. The support group became my family. Dorothy, who taught me that survival wasn't pretty, but it was worth it. Maria, who made me laugh for the first time in years. Jennifer, who helped me find a new apartment when I finally had enough money saved. These women knew the worst parts of my story and loved me anyway. They didn't need me to be useful or quiet or small. They just needed me to be real. 6 months after the confrontation, I moved out of that basement. I found a small one-bedroom apartment in a different neighborhood, a place with big windows and wooden floors and enough space for all the things I'd put in storage when I'd given up my life to move into theirs. I painted the walls yellow because I wanted to wake up to sunshine. I bought a new phone, a modern one, but I kept the pieces of my mother's rotary phone in a box in my closet, a reminder of what I'd survived. I started cooking again. Really cooking, not just making what other people wanted. I made dishes I loved, spicy food they'd said was too much, rich desserts they'd said I didn't need, experiments that sometimes failed beautifully. I cooked for myself, and sometimes for the women from group, and sometimes for neighbors who became friends. I cooked without permission and without apology. I reconnected with my daughter, the one they'd convinced me was too busy to talk. Turned out she'd been calling the whole time. They'd been intercepting her messages, telling her I was doing fine, that I was tired and would call her back later. When she found out what had happened, she drove 6 hours to help me move. She cried when she saw my basement apartment for the first time, the small windows and concrete floors, and she said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have checked." "They're very good liars," I told her. "That's not your fault." She asked me to move closer to her, to the city where her children lived. My other grandchildren, the ones I'd barely seen because I was always too busy helping my son and daughter-in-law with theirs. I thought about it. Really thought about it. A new place. A new start. A chance to watch different children grow up. Children whose parents wouldn't use me until I was empty. I'm planning the move now. I found an apartment near my daughter's house. A place with a porch where I can feed birds every morning without judgment. I'm imagining myself driving to visit in a Mercedes-Benz S-Class in pearl white. Not because I'll ever actually buy one, but because it's fun to dream big again, to want things without feeling guilty for wanting them. The lesson I need to share, the thing I wish someone had told me 3 years ago, is this: isolation as a tactic. Watch for when someone separates you from loved ones. That's how it starts. They cut you off slowly, tell you it's for your own good, that you're imagining things, that you're the problem. They control who you talk to, what you know, how you see yourself, and they do it so gradually that you don't notice you're being erased until you're already gone. Research reveals that elderly women suffer double the emotional abuse of other demographics, and I understand why now. We're taught to sacrifice, to serve, to make ourselves small. We're taught that good mothers, good grandmothers, good women put everyone else first. We're taught that setting boundaries is selfish, that saying no is cruel, that asking for respect is demanding too much. So, when someone exploits those lessons, when they use our own goodness against us, we don't recognize it as abuse. We think we're just being difficult. We think we're the problem. A 2012 study revealed that 1 in 4 nursing home residents suffered physical abuse. 1 in 4. When I read that statistic, I thought about how close I came to ending up in a facility my son and daughter-in-law would have chosen. Somewhere cheap and understaffed where I'd have been even more isolated, even more vulnerable. I think about all the women like me who didn't get out, who died believing they were the burden their families said they were. If someone is isolating you, limiting your contact with others, making you doubt your own mind, controlling your reality, trust yourself. You're not confused, you're not difficult, you're not the problem. You're being controlled, and you deserve better. Document everything. Take photos, save texts, record conversations. If you're in a one-party consent state, tell someone outside the situation, a doctor, a lawyer, a friend they haven't poisoned against you yet. Don't let them make you believe you're alone. You're not. There are people who will believe you, who will help you, who will remind you that you're not crazy. And here's the hardest truth. Sometimes the people who hurt you most never face real consequences. Sometimes they get to keep pretending they're good people. Sometimes your family believes their version of events and you lose relationships you can't get back. Sometimes justice is just getting out alive with your sanity intact. But that's still justice. That's still worth fighting for. I'm 60 years old. I lost 3 years to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. I lost money I'll never fully recover. I lost relationships with grandchildren who were taught, I'm the villain. I lost the fantasy that unconditional love means unconditional service. But I found myself again. The woman who feeds birds because she wants to, who wears cobalt blue dresses just because they make her feel beautiful, who cooks cornbread at dawn because gospel music and good food are their own kind of prayer. The woman who says no without apologizing, who takes up space without permission, who knows the difference between family and people who just share your blood. I still have hard days. Days when I wonder if I did the right thing, if I should have tried harder to keep the peace, if losing most of my family was worth keeping my dignity. But then I think about that basement apartment with the small windows, about the wine-stained dress, about sitting on a concrete floor sobbing next to a broken phone while people laughed at a party above me. And I know I made the right choice. So let me ask you something wherever you're listening to this. Are you in Brooklyn or Seattle or some small town in Texas? Are you listening while you cook dinner, while you drive to work, while you sit in a basement apartment wondering if you're losing your mind? Drop a comment and tell me where you're from. Tell me if this story sounds familiar. Tell me what you would have done. And if you're going through something like this right now, if someone is making you doubt yourself, if you're being erased one small boundary at a time, please know you're not alone. Your feelings are valid. Your reality is real. You deserve to be treated with respect, and you have the right to demand it. If this resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, share this story. Hit like so others can find it. Subscribe because I'm going to keep telling these stories. Keep reminding people that survival is possible, that justice comes in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself. Thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing witness. Thank you for believing that a 60-year-old woman in a wine-stained dress had the right to fight back. I hope you never need this story, but if you do, I hope it helps you remember. You are not the problem. You are not crazy. You are not alone, and you deserve so much better.